Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I'll give Nathan Pulsgrove of Garver a quick introduction and then let him present his panel and his session today. But Nathan is a planner, aviation planner with Garver, who I personally work with. So I've gotten to know Nathan over the years, and he's going to be presenting, he and his panel, on construction safety, security, and planning best practices. So Nathan, thank you for pulling that together for us this morning, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Ryan. And thanks for that introduction. Folks, I think you're really going to enjoy the presentations that have been prepared for you today, and really hearing from these expert panel members that I have, who really have deep expertise in safety, security, and phasing when it comes to construction projects. The three panel members that I have, one is Katie Elam, from Greenville Spartanburg Airport. Katie's a project manager there, and I'll give a more in-depth introduction to each of them as we get moving into their presentations. Also have Sarah Steves, who's the Senior Director of Operations for Denver International Airport, and then Chris Cole, who is the Airport Security Manager at San Antonio International Airport. Each of them is going to talk about kind of a different aspect of construction safety, security, and phasing, and some specific best practices that they've employed at their airports. One small housekeeping item, I do want to ask everybody to hold questions until the end. Each presentation is going to be about 10 minutes, then we'll have plenty of time at the end for everybody to talk. So leading us off is going to be Katie Elam. So Katie is an Auburn University graduate. She received her degree in aviation management there, and then began her career with the Georgia Department of Transportation as an aviation project manager, administering the FAA's AIP program to over 20 airports in Northwest Georgia and the metro Atlanta area. She went on to become the state planning manager, maintaining the state aviation system plan and supporting the planning efforts of over 100 public use airports in Georgia. After her time with the state, she worked as a planning consultant and project manager for 6 years. Katie started her position as project manager for Greenville Spartanburg Airport in July of 2021. She also serves as a board member for the South Carolina Aviation Association and is a part-time CFI and CFII as well. So a lot of great experience there. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and Katie, you can take it away. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for letting me talk to everybody this morning. So like Nathan said, I'm a project manager at GSP, and I'll be talking a little bit about how our CSPP process is managed. The next slide. So the Construction Safety and Phasing Plan, or the CSPP, and I'm going to try really hard during this presentation to not say GSPP, because it's so similar. So I'm going to try really hard not to do that. But the CSPP is developed, it's required for projects that are on airfield that use AIP funds, or if the airport certificate under Part 139 CSPP is required. As the airport operator, we're responsible for establishing and enforcing the CSPP, and in return, the contractor is responsible for complying with the CSPP and submitting their own safety plan and compliance document. Next slide. So how do we manage this process at GSP? Really, the process starts before design. So if we're managing or developing our CIP, we're looking at projects that are coming up, especially those airfield projects that we have going on that are more complex. We'll have roundtable discussions that starts early. So we'll sit down with the departments that are going to be impacted by that project. Really, every discussion we talk with facilities and operations, because those are the departments that really run the airport, and we want to make sure that we're making them happy, because we obviously need them. So really, that's where the discussion starts, is at the beginning of the project, right at the beginning of the planning. So we'll talk about construction phasing, where the contractor is going to be, what the haul routes should look like, where they can have their laydown areas, what tenants might be affected. And if any tenants are affected, then we rely on the operations department to keep communications up with the tenant and let them know this is where we are with the project and this is what's going on. Another aspect that we have to think about at GSP is that we are a single runway airport. So we have one runway one parallel taxiway. So any projects that shut down the taxiway or need a runway shutdown, we really have to start that planning really early in the process. Because we are one runway, we can't shut it down during the day. And absolutely, we cannot do that. So we have a very small window at night where we can have the runway shut down. So right now, with our cargo operations increasing and our airline schedules, we only have about 4 hours at night from 12:30 to really 5 a.m. So when you think about the time it takes to close the runway, do a FOD check, open it back up, really contractors only have about 4 hours of time on the runway to do any kind of work. So we have to start that coordination early. The other thing that we have at GSP, we have a construction safety and security guidelines document. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then we rely on our design reviews, like I mentioned, with all of the GSP departments as the project moves along. So the construction safety and security guidelines document, this is updated as needed and developed by our Senior Director of Public Safety and Operations Manager. So he is the one that updates this if something comes up. So he'll keep this updated, and really this document kind of covers everything that might come up during construction projects. So blasting, what to do about a crane, weather warning, security, temporary fencing, badging, all that stuff that a contractor really needs to know at the beginning is covered in this document. So we include it when we bid out the project in the specifications, and it's also an attachment in our CSPP. So the contractor is aware of this from the very beginning, and they're able to take a look at it and come to us with if they have any questions, but most of the time, this is pretty comprehensive. And we use this to really create a useful CSPP document, one that's not just filler to take up a word count and submit to the FAA, but one that is streamlined, one that is useful. It just covers what needs to be covered. And it really helps with our design engineers. We are lucky to work with 2 really good design firms or engineering firms. And so they've been working with us for a few years. So they know our process, they know what we want to see, and they know how to develop these documents. So it's really created a very streamlined process for us. One project I wanted to touch on during my time this morning with you guys is our taxiway Lima rehab. So this is a almost $14 million project where we're basically milling and overlaying portions of the taxiway and the asphalt shoulders. So originally, this project also included reconstructing our taxiway Lima and Lima 6. Unfortunately, that had to be taken out because there wasn't enough funding. But then it was included again. So we've had to make several revisions to the CSPP and submitting it to the FAA a couple of times to get this right. Next slide. So like I mentioned originally, we had more phases. Lima 5 and Lima 6 was taken out because of funding. We also coordinated with the contractor because they had some concerns about the phasing and the schedule. So we were able to work with them and come up with a better phased approach to the project. So that again required submitting a revision to the FAA. Next slide. And this is just one of the pages from that safety and phasing plan. It just, I like to take a look at the documents and really just notice that, like I mentioned before, with a single runway, single taxiway, we have to really be careful how we phase the work because we have our cargo is located on one area of the airport, our airlines are located on another. So if the taxiway is closed somewhere in between, there's going to be back taxiing. So we really have to be careful of how we're doing that. And one issue that came up during this project that I wanted to touch on before I hand it back to Nathan, when we closed down our taxiways, Alpha and Bravo, at the south end of the runway, that really prohibited 747s and other aircraft from getting turned around to get onto the runway. So everybody was having to make 180-degree turns on the runway at the end, which for a lot of aircraft isn't, that's not a big deal, but for the 747, the operators were telling us that they needed over 150 feet width to do that. We have 150 feet wide published, and we're actually a little bit wider than that, it's just not published. So what we ended up having to do is paint some temporary 747 turnaround markings on the runway so that they could get turned around as efficiently as possible, I guess. So just something that, those are little things that we have to think about when we're phasing our projects so that we keep all of our tenants and operators happy. So just with a single runway, it really can create some complex situations that we have to think about. So, and Nathan, I think that might be it for me.
Excellent. Thanks, Katie. One thing I want to just kind of emphasize that she mentioned is we had the privilege, Carver had the privilege of doing ACRP project 0803, which focused on best practices in construction safety phasing, and that should be coming out hopefully soon over the next couple months. One of the things that Katie mentioned that we found as kind of a general best practice was airports creating their own kind of safety and security guidelines, much like what she talked about. We really found like when that is developed and then maintained, it can really give the contractor, the engineer, et cetera, a good sense of how you want things conducted at your airport. So just wanted to emphasize that again. Thank you, Katie. So next up, we have Sarah Steves. I already introduced Sarah briefly earlier, but she's the Senior Director of Airport Operations at the Denver International Airport. In this role, she's responsible for airfield ops, the ramp tower, communication center, and the emergency management team. She also plays a key role in the oversight and planning and execution of airport construction projects, including multi-project collaboration, which she's going to talk quite a bit about today. Prior to joining Denver, she served as the airport operations and security manager at Key West International Airport and also worked with the FAA, and she also has her private pilot's license. So Sarah, I'm going to click to the next slide and turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Hopefully. Awesome. Perfect. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate the time. I have quite a bit of content, so let's just roll right to the next slide. Thank you for the great introduction, Nathan. So what I'm going to talk about is really airport collaboration and planning through the entire project lifespan is the best way of explaining it. Here at Denver, we have quite a bit going on. We're just finally coming into the final phases of turning on 39 new gates, which is more than most medium hub airports gate totals combined. We also have several other projects that I'll talk about later in the slides here. But I wanted to really talk about how ops is liaison with our project planning team. We have a planning department as well as many consultants on board, and typically, depending on the project, there is an entire project team associated with the project. So from the operations side of the house, we truly believe in being heavily involved right from the beginning, and that really starts in the CIP and AIP planning. At the highest level and at the lowest level, we take a look at all of the things that our airfield, terminal, ramp tower folks are seeing, and really try to lobby what projects should be put forward, assess risk, look at all the different facets of what needs to go forward first. Then we move into the design phase. So when we're actually awarded a project, either CIP or AIP funded, and the backing is there with the green light, typically every facet of operations is heavily involved in everything from the 30, 60, 90% review all the way to 100%. Typically, we are heavily involved in the scope of work. So we like to engage with our stakeholders early on, and that's one of the tidbits that I think makes us so successful. We really look at how this impacts our airport and our airfield specifically. we're a very busy airport. We have a very small window of time in the year to rehab or construct any sort of pavement out on our airside surfaces. So we really have to dial that schedule in, figure out what the biggest risks are, assess those milestones. And most oftentimes we assign a liquidated damage associated with certain milestones, especially if we need that pavement back at a certain time frame, aka outside of de-icing season and snow removal season, as well as just different operational functions of different areas on the airfield. So we're heavily involved in all of those, as well as airport operations also gives guidance on our construction bid documents. We actually submit several pages worth of content and material that are requirements, whether that be haul route requirements, driving requirements. We actually have a flagger training program here at Den because we have so much construction going on. We can't just rely on our driver training program. So all of that is put up front in the bid documents, as well as assessing those milestones and those benchmarks that our contractors have to meet. And then lastly, we're heavily involved in the safety risk assessment and the SRMP. We liaison with our safety group and bring together every stakeholder that would be experiencing this project. That's pilots, that's controllers, that's ramp tower controllers, FAA controllers, airside ops, airlines, you name it, they're all involved. And it's a pretty extensive process. We look at everything from haul routes to placement of flaggers to what types of surfaces will be open. And we actually are heavily involved in the FAA's publication of system impacts. So typically around this time frame in the year, end of March, early April is when we publish what our schedule is going to forecast for the summer season to the FAA, and we work with not only our air traffic control tower, but TRACON and center to come up with a systems impact and game plan how we'll get through the construction season. Next slide. So these are just some of the projects we have going on right now at Den. I just wanted to kind of give perspective of how much is going on and the need for collaboration here at Denver. We just have a massive amount of construction, and I know there's a lot of other airports out there feeling the same way. We have the 39 gates coming online. We have taxiway Echo, which is alleviating a hotspot on the airfield. It's not quite an end around taxiway, but something similar. We're relocating a de-ice pond and actually boring underneath of a runway. We have an annual runway rehab that we do every year. We have 6 runways here. We take one down every summer to do panel replacement, lighting upgrades, paint, signage, you name it. We're all kind of just waiting for the shoe to drop on the approach departure signage. So those are some great examples of what we work on. We do PLB replacement continually. We do gate apron rehab continually. Sorry, my little screen's in the way here, can't see. We also do a lot of water vaults rehab and just other, think of city projects on an airfield, because Den is 53 square miles and we have a whole lot of concrete and a whole lot of maintenance to do. Next slide. Awesome. So a little bit about our construction process. In our pre-construction meeting, the operations team is also heavily involved with the project management team in spelling out what's expected, from haul routes to contractor access, badging requirements, which you'll hear later on. A lot about 7460s. We actually have a closure process that I'm going to show you guys that we've created through our VOT platform. Hopefully a lot of people on this call are familiar with that 139 tool. And I think we've made a really great improvement to that tool. So maybe it's something you can take away to your own airport. We have a shutdown request process. We go through everything and anything that could impact them on the airfield, whether that be snow, SMIGs, and just conformance of 150, 50 to 10 in general. Mobilization, site capture, that's typically for your larger scale projects, like taking a runway down for an extended period of time or taking a taxiway down for extended period of time. We have a go, no go that day, and we're very strategic about mobilizing these projects. Another great thing that we have here at DEN is our weekly airfield closure coordination meeting. So that happens every Thursday at 11 a.m. And basically how this works is I have a construction liaison team in my airside ops department, and they manage all of the construction that happens inside the fence. We have a separate team that manages the terminal and inside concourses, but this team holds a meeting every Thursday at 11, and all the proposed work that's submitted through this tool that I'll show you later on is reviewed at that meeting. And you have to either attend the Zoom or be there in person to speak to that scope of work, speak to who's going to be on site, anything and everything as far as questions that would come up, we discuss in that meeting. It's typically an hour long. And we also invite all of our project managers from some of those projects I just mentioned previous to just give a brief out on where they are in their project. As you can imagine, with 39 gates, we have a ton of fuel work, a ton of water work, and a lot of overlap in scope. And so that creates some pretty tricky situations, especially with shutdowns, different system shutdowns, and just closures in general. So next slide, please. So we also drill down to 2 daily calls, and those are held by the on-duty managers that are also within our airside ops department. One's at 6:30 in the morning and one's at 8:45 at night. And we have a briefing phone bridge. And on that briefing phone bridge, anyone who is looking to close pavement, shut down a system, impact the airport in general, they're required to call in. So they call into the conference call, and we discuss whether it's a go, no go, and really look at all the risks of the airport, whether we are experiencing weather, delays, et cetera. And then we actually make the closure happen or the shutdown happen. And Nathan, if I can, I know I have 1 minute left here. I'll just go very quickly. If I could share my screen. Thank you for the reminder. Sorry, I'm trying to go fast here. Lots of content. Let me know if that's being shared. So I supplied some links. I think Nathan is going to share this presentation with you. Pretty close to my time limit here, but this is our outward facing, our public facing airfield construction form. And in this form, we have it public facing so that whether you're internal to DEN or external to DEN, i.e. a contractor, you can submit what type of closure you're looking for. You would select a date, a time, and then actually the surface that you're looking to close. So we have added mapping, and we use our GIS through our VOC platform. We've actually mapped out all the surfaces on our airfield and made them selectable so that it's a lot easier to coordinate that. We found a lot of redundancies, and this allows us to create overlap with closures and reduce the amount of times we close pavement here, because pavement is very at a premium, let's put it that way. So this tool allows us to look at all the scopes of work and change the closure requests in order to maximize the use of the airfield, as well as maximize the work window in which we can accomplish, whether that be routine maintenance, other projects, things like that. Am I at time, Nathan? I want to make sure everyone has time. Not hearing anything. So another feature to this.
Yeah, Sarah, sorry,
Okay.
I was trying to get off mute. Maybe
Sorry.
another 30 seconds or so, and I think
Okay.
it'll be good.
Yeah. Another feature to this that I just want to show is we use an outward facing schedule so that all of our partners can see what's on the deck for the day. Everything is listed in a general calendar in which people can look up, which I've also supplied those links. We have a host of other things that we've built into the VOC platform, as well as everything from 7460s, looking at when our OE AAA, some of those FDC NOTAMs will time out because we have so many things up in the air right now. If you all have any more questions or want to talk further on this, please feel free to reach out and I'll provide my information in the chat. I know that there's a lot here, but thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Sarah. We've had the opportunity to work with Denver as part of that that same ACRP project, and I just want to say how impressed we were as part of that project with all the great work they do with multi-project collaboration, like Sarah talked about. So the next presenter is Chris Cole. So Chris is the airport security manager at San Antonio International Airport. Chris is responsible for leading the security division, which includes badge and ID, security operations, compliance, and systems. He has over 20 years of experience in aviation security and airport operations and has worked at Dallas Love, DFW, Dallas Executive Airport, and of course now San Antonio. And he's worked on a number of innovative security initiatives within the industry, including security management systems, which is kind of akin to safety management systems, but more with a focus on security and security culture development, et cetera. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris. And Chris, I'm going to start sharing my screen again.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me today. Got a few slides to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so really what I'm going to discuss a little bit is about the construction and how I would be looking at security risk and more proactive security when you're doing construction and design. So my first slide here just talks about security risk, basically looking at the threats, the vulnerabilities, and the consequences associated if occurrence were to happen at your airport. Really just covering some of the current emerging security threats that we're seeing today. Obviously, the one that we're hearing right now, especially with the Russian and Ukraine war, is actually the cyber threat. But with any construction project, you're going to be looking at insider threat, specifically theft. If you look at the picture on the right, top right, that's actually happened at our airport. Somebody cut through a fence line to a construction laydown area just within a few yards away. Active shooter, obviously these are things that we at airports and all over the place that we have to worry about. Now UAS and the threats to that. And then the area I like to focus on is just the local threats, the gangs, the drugs, and so forth. Really trying to understand your area. All these are threats to all of us, but local threats, there are some more specific threats that may apply to your area. And, some areas have, obviously law enforcement will, you can work with them to understand those type of threats. Like San Antonio, we have a fusion center that gives us a lot of that intel as well. Next slide, please. Project planning. I have a different approach when it comes down to project planning. And my first sentence there just talks about if you're doing new construction, renovation, typically security professionals, we're always looking at anything that impacts the sterile area, the secured area, AOA, SIDA, threats and risks to those areas. But one area that typically, well, I wouldn't say typically, but that we do see where it's missed is the public area, and getting input from security professionals on any kind of projects that are going on in the public area. That could be as simple as putting a FedEx box in the terminals. It could be as building a brand new consolidated rental car facility that's just within 300 feet or so from the terminal. But those are just things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing a project. So approaching a project, always look in two phases. First is the design. Obviously understand the federal security requirements. But also look outside, just looking at, meeting those requirements. Look at your threats from the previous slide I had. Look at if there's any other assessments that you should be performing to include into a design of a project or into a facility. Include a security committee. Sometimes that's missed. I know through my career, I've seen that where sometimes we're invited to participate with input on projects, and then other times we're not. So include a security committee on all designs, whether it's even building a parking garage or consolidated rail car facility or runway project. Always include security professionals, and that can include the airport security coordinator. And ours will include FAA, TSA, CBP, FBI, and so forth. But one thing I want to highlight here is the cyber professionals. As now we're starting to see the threat of cyber threats and attacks, include cyber professionals as part of your working group. Now, the next phase is the construction phase. And we have a tendency to kind of go on a narrow vision of looking at just regulatory compliance, such as badging, access, and escorting. But again, start looking at much broader. Look at the laydown areas. If you look at the picture to the right, it's in the middle. You see there's a gate or a fence on the left-hand side, and then to the right on the other side of the perimeter road, you can see there's kind of a laydown area. And we actually had somebody come through the fence line, more than likely insider threat, and took some equipment at night and went back through the fence. So those things you want to look at when you're putting down lay down areas and so forth, whether it's secured or in an area that you can secure. And then the security plan, typically construction projects, you want to have the contractor put a security plan, obviously meeting what your requirements are, but also looking at after your threat vulnerability assessment, maybe put have them put some of their measures in place to help mitigate some of those. And then consider performing a threat vulnerability assessment as well for construction. So I would look at it both on the design and construction. Next slide, please. I put some best practices here. I'm not gonna review all of these, but the ones that are highlighted: establishing a security culture. I have actually a slide or two to cover that. Keeping construction footprint small, short distances, haul routes, and limited access points. We're actually example that we're working on a terminal project where we're adding a few more gates, and the contractor submitted, to put a temporary wall up in a sterile environment, and they actually wanted to put a door to access the construction site from the sterile area. And they actually had another point of access from the secured area. So we told them, no, we don't want no access through the to the sterile area. Just go ahead and remove that door as part of the proposal. But it's things like that, just taking a looking at your risk of that. Reducing insider threat risk, which is a big deal. Insider threat risk will start off small, typically theft. But if there's more enticing or want to do more damage, we've been in this industry that they can use their badge privileges and their access privileges to do a lot more. So look at electronic keys to improve accountability and record keeping. And then permanent intrusion detection systems is also another option, especially watching lay down areas and so forth, and protecting those areas. Next slide. Real quick, San Antonio, we initiated a project a few years ago, 2014, on SEMS, very similar to the SMS concept. This really, it's developing a culture. It's not only a top-down, but a bottom-up approach. It encourages input, always looking for improvements. It's beyond the regulatory requirements. And so we just implemented our program last year. Now we have aviation staff going through training in our statement here says it maintains compliance with TSA regulations, but protects assets through effective risk-based management. And that's kind of what SIMS is all about, is always looking for improvements. Some examples on the next slide is what we have done, we have the ID Challenge Zone program, which includes handing out a card as when we issue new badges. But the one on the left there, the yellow one, is also signage that's throughout the ramp areas. See something, say something. Communication, we're very active in, we do monthly security newsletters. We have a program that we promote, SPEAR, Security Partners Engage, Where and Ready. Our partnerships with TSA, the FBI, and so forth, we're constantly communicating and including stakeholders and our meetings, and then technology. My last slide really just talks about the resources. As I, sorry, but flying through this presentation, obviously this can be a discussion that can last days, but there are a lot of resources that I know throughout my career I didn't know about, or other airports didn't know about, but there's just a lot of great resources from Safe Skies. So some of even the information that I covered today are in Safe Skies reports. If any of your security professionals, whether it's police or on the civilian side, as is another great way of getting resources. And there's a membership for that, but it's great. A lot of great resources that are free if you join as a member. Department of Homeland Security, CESA, we just did actually what they call a MASA, multi-asset systems assessment, and we just completed it a couple weeks ago. And they're free assessments and trainings, and a lot of airports don't know that. So if you have an interest in that, and actually, just to let everybody know, they did our tabletop exercise back in October, and they're going to be doing it again for us here this coming year as well. So if you need a contact, let me know, and I can pass you along some information on that. And then TSA recommended guidelines for airport planning, design, and construction. I know that document, I think, is like 2011, but there's some good information on there, especially for those that work in the design of, facilities, assets, whatever it may be. And then just always consider a security risk blast assessment. Typically that's done through a qualified engineer firm. And then below, you'll see kind of an image. That's an example of our SIMS risk assessment tool. And actually, we had a firm that helped us, engineering firm that helped us kind of put it together. But this was a collaboration with the FBI, various stakeholders in the airport arena to put this together so we can use it for construction reviews for risk assessment. And I'll go ahead and stop there.
All right, thanks, Chris. That's all the presentation that we have. So if we want to open it up for questions for these panel members.
Hey, Nathan, this is Nathan Luce in Memphis, and appreciate the panelists. This has been great fun. I always love presentations, and we see the good and the wonderful from the different airports. I'm curious from the panelists to hear them describe their one biggest headache in construction management.
It's a good question. Anybody can start. Katie, Sarah, I see you both on video already. Do one of you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. I think my biggest headache is as a project manager, my job is to really rally the right people in the right spot at the right time to coordinate really the project. And I find that is really kind of the most frustrating part for me, is making sure I have the right people in the room and having the right conversation, because that can get complicated, or it can get, you can forget the one person, and that's the person that should be there. And to me, I think that's frustrating, is just kind of corralling rabbits is what I feel like sometimes.
I think the most frustrating thing for my role, oh man, it's almost a tie. really giving the tools for maybe weebies and maybe other disadvantaged businesses and enabling them to do work here at such a large facility. That's extremely difficult. The amount of risk that's associated, the amount of coverage in which they have to apply for. We do have ROSIP programs here that are very helpful, but we're actually reassessing all of the ways in which we can engage those companies and maybe give them a little more boost or help in participating, because oftentimes the big heavy hitters are the ones that can afford to play the game. And I think on the other thing that would be really, really difficult here is honestly, we're one of the newest airports out there, 27 years old. And when you build something all at once, things go wrong all at once. So assessing that risk and level of need to either make repairs, changes, et cetera, and just trying to figure out what goes first, it can be extremely difficult.
And I would say communication's the biggest issue that I've experienced, and it's like I guess the security person's the last to know, but should have been probably one of the first to know. And that could be as simple as, I've seen it where the project leads change up and say, okay, now we're going to add another access portal. And they kind of already proved that without going through the formal process. So even my presentation that it's, we're SIMs and we do, improve communications, you still have that challenge with communications in various levels. So I think this is just those things you got to work through and try to stress right from the beginning, and just kind of, I guess, keep your finger on the pulse on it and make sure that you're involved.
Excellent. Other questions for the group? Give it a second to see if anybody comes off mute. I'll throw out one question to the panel. Are there particular types of projects that you have found to be more challenging? Either because of number of stakeholders involved, location, et cetera, but any particular types of projects that you found to be the most challenging?
I can start that out if you want. I always find that the terminal ones, and especially the ones that are being done in the sterile area, which whether it's built out of a concessions area or new gates or whatever, that seems to cause challenges in multiple ways. Sterile areas are sensitive area of the airport, and it could be as simple as construction workers going and moving equipment material, and then they'll be throwing knives or jigsaws into the common area trash cans in the sterile area, and it just drives me nuts. We always communicate not to do that. We have it on written in policy, but they still do it because they have a lot of various specialty, like so forth, that may come for 1 or 2 days and then they're leaving. So that seems to be our challenge.
I think from my perspective, I think the most challenging projects are those that involve a runway closure, because our timing is so condensed. We have 12:30 to 5 a.m. If the stars have got to be aligned, the plans have to be absolutely correct. The contractor has to be on top of it, has to have all of their, their people and their machine, that everything has to be so coordinated and so on point that any kind of delay means the night is lost. So I think once we had Clemson football was coming back from the game and they were going to be 45 minutes late coming in, so that really that kind of threw a wrench in that whole night, and we couldn't close the runway down because the contractor just did not have enough time to get done what he needed to. So for us, I think, or for me, that's the most challenging.
Yeah, those one runway constructions are very difficult. My career in the Keys, we did an asphalt overlay as well. It's very challenging when, you know, 1 inch of your runway is ungrooved, it's considered all ungrooved. And when you have no staging area for a batch plant and your closest asphalt is coming from 3.5 hours away, we worked heavily with FDOT in understanding how US1 worked, dispatching those trucks and making sure it made it on time. That's one very stressful project in my career I will never forget. I think the other one I'm going through right now is our Great Hall project in Denver. Those of you that may have traveled through our terminal, it is a fishbowl and probably Chris's worst nightmare for security. It's on 5. We have level 6, which is a bird eye view of everything going on. So we're really pushing hard to correct that. And there are a ton of challenges with that. And moving people around and security risk, even in a public area, up against an operating screening operation. We typically on a normal day see from 60 to 70,000 passengers through screening. We can operate up to 27 plus lanes. And we are struggling with that, and definitely queuing space, peak times, all of that sort of stuff. Airline moves, baggage problems, integrating different systems into from old to new. It's a stressful gig.
Thank you all for those responses. I know we're out of time here, so I'm going to kick it back over to Mr. Sizemore to see if he has anything to close us out. But I want to just say thank you again to Katie, Sarah, and Chris for your presentations today and for all your work.
Yeah, absolutely, Nathan. I concur 100%. And thank you guys for being timely and always honoring everyone's morning. So great job, and thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Everybody take
Thank you,
care.
guys.
Good one, everybody.